He left his black wife for someone younger. Tonight, she returned, without warning, without a word, beside a billionaire. At the Getty Villa, Old Money watched in silence as a black Rolls-Royce whispered through the gates. Cream silk. No smile, not a glance, but her ex stopped mid-sentence. His new wife stopped breathing. They thought she disappeared. But what she built in the dark was never meant to stay hidden. They see her now, powerful, composed, untouchable. But once, she was just a girl, trying not to be noticed. 17. Brown skin, quiet posture, ink-stained hands. She sat in the far corner of the library, hiding behind a stack of worn books, reading Morrison like her life depended on it. No laptop, no Starbucks cup, just silence. A voice snapped across the still air. "This isn't a youth center." The librarian didn't look angry, just inconvenienced. Amara blinked, closed the book without a word, held it like it was the only thing that still believed in her. She didn't argue, she never did, because girls like her learned early. Freedom isn't always taken. Sometimes it's quietly denied, and the world doesn't even notice. But she did. She thought this time would be different. New campus, new voices, a place where words mattered. The email arrived at 7:12 a.m. "We appreciate your submission. However, your proposed dissertation is not aligned with institutional neutrality." She read it twice, then a third time. Same tone, same cold. They didn't question her research. They questioned her lens. Too personal, too political, too hers. The topic was simple: how literature reflects the interior lives of black women in post-colonial America. But in their eyes, it wasn't academic. It was agenda. Amara stared at the screen. Not angry, just still. This wasn't the first time her voice was called too much, but this time it came in Times New Roman, 12 pt, signed with "regards," and that made it hurt more. He didn't call her to debate. He called her to dismiss her, nicely. Office door half closed, sunlight across old books. He leaned back, hands folded like he'd done this before. "We publish ideas, not wounds." His voice was calm, practiced, almost kind. Amara didn't speak. She didn't nod, just sat there, lips pressed tight. He went on. Something about tone, balance, how readers respond better to distance. She already knew what he meant. Less black, less personal, less her. Her thesis wasn't too loud, it just refused to whisper. She blinked slowly. Still didn't say a word. Some moments don't need anger, just silence sharp enough to leave a scar. By the time he looked back at her, she was already standing. Not in protest, just because the conversation was over. 200 pages, margins filled with quiet rage, lines underlined, whole paragraphs rewritten by hand. She folded the manuscript in half. The pages made a soft sound, like breath leaving. Then she placed it on the highest shelf next to old yearbooks and winter scarves. Not hidden, but out of reach. Her mother stood by the kitchen door, holding a mug that had gone cold. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Her eyes did the talking, soft, wet, proud, and hurting in a way only mothers know. Amara didn't cry. She just stared at the folded paper, like it still had a heartbeat. Her mother looked at her, then nodded once. Not approval, not comfort, just understanding. Because sometimes the strongest women in the room are the ones who say nothing and feel everything. She switched majors the same week she gave up her dissertation. No announcements, just paperwork and a quiet sigh of relief. Publishing, stories, voices that mattered. At the Ivy League Student Book Fair, she manned a folding table with secondhand titles and print-on-demand zines. No banners, just a handwritten sign. Read what they don't teach. That's when he stopped. White Oxford shirt, designer watch, slightly amused smile. He picked up a Baldwin reprint, thumbed the corner. "Did you choose this one?" She nodded. "It chooses me, most days." He didn't laugh. He listened. Asked about the press, the cover design. Stayed too long for someone just browsing. She didn't know his last name, not yet, but in a space built for the elite, he looked at her like she belonged there. And for the first time in weeks, she almost believed it. Charles invited her to a weekend in the Hamptons. He called it casual. Just a gathering. The house wasn't a house. It was a mansion with glass walls and private ocean air. She wore a soft blue dress. Simple. Clean. She was the only black woman there. The first hour passed in polite smiles and small talk. People asked where she studied, but not what she loved. They nodded too quickly, looked past her too often. Someone said, "You must work in fashion. You have that look." She smiled, said nothing. The wine was chilled, the food was perfect, but the air, just slightly off. She felt it in the glances, not cruel, just measured. Charles never noticed, or maybe he did and chose not to name it. That hurt more than the silence. She wasn't invisible. She was being observed, like an exception, not a guest, a test. She found Amara near the balcony overlooking the water, a soft breeze, a softer voice. Charles's mother wore pearls and a navy cardigan, not a wrinkle out of place. "You're impressive," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sharp, articulate, confident." She paused, sipped her tea. Then, "But you know what they'll say, right? You're a phase." Amara didn't flinch, didn't respond. The silence stretched long enough to feel heavy. "It's not personal," the woman added gently. "This family has a legacy, a rhythm. You change the tempo." She touched Amara's arm lightly, like a compliment, then turned and walked away. No yelling, no insult, just a statement wrapped in silk. Amara stood still, hands at her sides. She wasn't shocked. She was just tired. And the worst part? A small part of her expected it. The engagement party was everything money could buy. Live strings, ice sculptures, champagne that never stopped flowing. Amara stood near the edge of the patio, close enough to be present, far enough to be missed. She wore gold. Not flashy, elegant. But it didn't matter. Her skin walked in before her name ever did. Two women passed by, both in satin, both holding flutes of sparkling envy. One of them glanced over, leaned in, and whispered with a smirk, "She looks like the Help." The other stifled a laugh. Amara heard it. Of course she did. They always speak just loud enough. She didn't move, didn't turn her head. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the horizon, like the ocean might answer for her. Moments like this don't need confrontation. They're already sharp enough to bleed. And sometimes silence is the only thing that keeps your dignity intact. She got the invitation on a Monday. A literary conference at Columbia. Keynote panel. Her name in print. 6 years of silence finally meant something. That same night, Charles handed her an envelope. Inside, 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives. "You've been stressed. Let's escape," he smiled. She paused. "But the panel—" He cut in gently. "You'll have other chances, but we need this now." She nodded slowly. Didn't argue. Just sent a short, polite email. Unable to attend due to a scheduling conflict. No one questioned it, except her. She folded the speech she'd spent months writing, tucked it in her drawer without a word. Outside, Charles poured champagne. Inside, something dimmed. Not because she chose love, but because, once again, her voice was the first thing to go quiet. The corporate newsletter came in a gold-trimmed envelope. Front cover, "A Legacy Continues, the Whitmore Wedding." Inside were pages of smiling faces, candles, champagne, the perfect coastal ceremony, but not Amara. Not in the group shots, not in the family spreads, not even in the bridal portrait. Her mother flipped through each glossy page with careful hands. 1, 2, 3, nothing. She blinked, then went back. Slower this time, still nothing. She didn't say a word, just closed the album softly, like it might break. On the back cover, the company tagline glowed, "Built on tradition, focused on the future." Amara stood at the sink, drying dishes, back turned. She didn't ask what was inside. She already knew. Sometimes erasure doesn't come with rage. It comes printed on cardstock and mailed with love. It started with a repost. An old campus video, grainy, handheld. Charles and Amara laughing under autumn trees, their hands linked, eyes soft, young. Someone clipped it, captioned it. "Affirmative action couple." The post went viral within hours. Comments rolled in. "He's just rebelling. She fits the diversity brochure. She won't last past graduation." Amara read none of them. She didn't need to. She'd heard it before, just never this loud. At work, an older black woman quietly slid her coffee closer. I went through the same thing. One line, heavy with memory. Amara nodded once, held the warmth of the cup in both hands. Some insults aren't meant to be understood. They're designed to shrink you, but this time she didn't shrink. She just sat taller and let the storm pass without moving. The message came late at night. Simple, sharp, heavy. Did you use love to move up? It was from a student Amara once mentored. Young, brilliant, still learning how cruel the world could be. She didn't answer right away. No defense, no anger, just a quiet exhale, like something old had returned. She opened her photo archive, scrolling past years of headlines and conference photos, until she found it, a blurry snapshot. 17-year-old Amara, sitting cross-legged on a cold library floor. Toni Morrison in her lap, second-hand hoodie, ink-stained fingers. No spotlight. Just a girl, reading to survive. She sent the photo, no caption, a pause, then the reply. They don't know you at all. She didn't write back. She just closed the app and looked out the window. Some questions deserve silence. Some truths speak through memory. And maybe that's the real heartbreak, when the world doubts your rise because they never cared to ask where you started. What would you send someone if they questioned your worth? Drop it in the comments. Someone out there might need to see it. The headline hit the tabloids like a slap. From Ivy League to gold digger, Whitmore's ex-wife walks away empty-handed. No settlement, no press release, just silence, wrapped in public shame. She signed the divorce papers in a sterile law office. No handshake, no closure, just ink. When she stepped outside, no car waited, no cameras followed, only the wind, and the feeling of starting over with nothing but her breath. Social media tore her apart. Told you she was after the money. She married up. Now she's right back where she belongs. What they didn't know, she declined the payout. She left with no house, no brand deals, no claim to his name. Because leaving wasn't about taking anything. It was about reclaiming herself. She didn't cry. Not then. But that night, in her tiny apartment with peeling paint and no furniture, she looked in the mirror and whispered, "If I'm starting from zero, at least this time it's mine." The sign was taped crooked to the dusty glass. For sale, final week. She hadn't planned to stop, but the bookstore, that bookstore, pulled her in like memory does. 10 years ago, they asked her to leave for reading too long. "This isn't a library, sweetheart." The owner had said it with a smile sharp as vinegar. Now the lights buzzed low, shelves half empty. That same owner stood behind the counter, flipping through receipts. He looked up as the bell chimed. Eyes scanned her face and paused, blank. No flicker of recognition. She was invisible again, but this time not because she was small, because she had grown past his memory. She walked the aisles slowly, fingers brushing the spines. A copy of Beloved caught her eye. She opened it, read a line, then placed it gently back. Didn't buy anything, didn't say a word. Some victories don't need confetti. Sometimes just standing where you were once unwelcome is enough. She returned 2 days later. No entourage, no suit, no press, just a quiet folder in her hand. The owner looked up, tired and anxious. He started to speak, some tired pitch about foot traffic and rising rent. She didn't interrupt. She just handed him the contract. Full asking price, no negotiation, no hesitation. He blinked. Why? She smiled, barely. Because some things aren't worth haggling over. An hour later, the keys were hers. She stood alone in the middle of the empty shop, dust dancing in sunbeams. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like restoration. That night, she painted the new sign herself. Steady hand, bold letters, legacy corner, not for ego, not for credit, but for every girl who once thought she didn't belong in a place like this. When it opened a week later, the shelves weren't filled with bestsellers. They were filled with stories that once saved her, and now they were ready to save someone else. Soft justice. The kind that doesn't need applause. The press gathered, microphones ready, flashbulbs prepped for the woman of the hour. But Amara wasn't at the podium. She was in the back row. No spotlight, no speech. The dean cleared his throat. Today, we launch the Ellington Scholarship, dedicated to students who were told they didn't belong. Polite applause. Cameras clicked. Amara watched quietly as the first group of recipients took the stage. Brown skin, wide eyes, nervous hands clutching folders full of dreams. One girl adjusted her braids before stepping forward. Another boy mouthed, "Thank you," into the crowd, unsure who he was thanking. She didn't wave, didn't rise, just placed a hand over her heart and nodded once. No one pointed her out, but a few students caught her gaze and knew. This wasn't about recognition. It was about rewriting the future for kids who looked like her. She didn't give them her name. She gave them a starting line she never had. Getty Villa shimmered under sunset gold, an invite-only literary gala where influence dressed like elegance. At the top of the guest list, Charles Whitmore and Isabella Sterling, heir to a real estate dynasty. She, flawless in white satin, rebranded as a philanthropist overnight. Their names echoed through the courtyard. The couple shaping cultural philanthropy. Legacy meets vision. Champagne flutes clinked. Their photo lined the welcome brochure. Charles shook hands like a senator, nodding with rehearsed charm. Isabella laughed, lips glossed, camera ready. Even the marble statues seemed to lean in her direction. People whispered, admiring. She really elevated him. Look at them now. Powerful, untouchable. But no one asked what they stood for, just how they looked doing it. It felt like a victory parade. Yet, under the soft classical music and garden lights, there was something brittle in Charles's jaw. A flicker in Isabella's eyes, like she was performing herself. It was their moment. But something was missing. And soon, everyone would feel it. The Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up in complete silence. No announcement. No valet scramble. Just presence. The door opened. Amara stepped out. Elegant, composed, effortless. A long black coat draped over her shoulders, heels clicking with no need to rush. No jewelry, no assistant. Just gravity. A murmur spread like wind through silk. "Isn't she?" Someone whispered from behind a wine glass. No one said her name. But somehow, everyone knew her face. It wasn't the fame of tabloids. It was the recognition of someone who had once been dismissed and had quietly risen above every room that forgot her. Heads turned. Not out of curiosity, but out of reverence. Even Isabella paused mid-laugh. Charles's hand tightened around his glass. No cameras clicked. No host announced her. But still, the room shifted. She didn't claim the center. She didn't need to. She'd become the kind of woman who makes the spotlight follow her, without asking. As Amara approached her table, a man stood. Julian Mercer, billionaire, founder of Helin AI. Quiet power in a tailored charcoal suit. He didn't kiss her cheek, didn't touch her waist, just pulled out her chair, gently, precisely, like it mattered. She nodded once. He met her eyes, then sat beside her. Not in front, not behind. No display, no hand-holding, just two minds seated as equals. Conversations nearby slowed. People glanced sideways, curious but unsure why. Because this wasn't romance built on spectacle. It was something else. The way he leaned slightly when she spoke, the way she rested her hand on the table, not needing to grasp his. There was no performance, only presence. Someone whispered, "Is that Julian Mercer?" Another replied, "What's he doing with her?" But even that question landed wrong, because the answer was obvious to anyone really watching. She wasn't beside power. She was part of it. The MC stepped up, scanning the room. A brief pause, then, "Miss Amara Ellington, would you honor us with a few words?" The spotlight didn't move. She didn't stand right away. Julian looked over, said nothing, only gave a single nod. Amara rose. No fanfare, no cue cards, just the sound of her heels crossing polished stone. At the podium, she didn't thank the crowd. She didn't list achievements. Instead, she let silence settle, like a breath before truth. Then softly, she spoke. Toni Morrison once said, "Freeing yourself was one thing, but claiming ownership of that freed self is another." The room went still. No applause, no cheers, just something deeper, a shift. As if every woman who had ever been overlooked, every soul who had been quiet for too long, felt seen in that moment. Amara stepped down. No speech, just a quote that cut through decades of noise. And for the first time, it wasn't her story they heard. It was their own. As Amara stepped away from the podium, her footsteps echoed louder than any applause. No one clapped, but one by one, they stood. An old woman near the back, a young man gripping a notebook, a black mother holding her daughter's hand. No words, no signal, just something unspoken pulling them to their feet. Julian didn't move. He just looked at her like someone watching a legacy unfold. Charles sat frozen. Isabella blinked too slowly, unsure what was happening, as if confused why silence felt louder than any spotlight they'd ever stood under. Mara didn't turn back to the stage. She walked through the aisle, shoulders straight, eyes calm, passing rows of people who no longer saw her as a name or a past. They saw her as a mirror, a quiet storm they all understood, and in that moment, she hadn't just reclaimed her story. She gave them permission to reclaim theirs too. From the far corner of the room, Isabella took a step back. Subtle, but clear. The camera lights that once clung to her sequined gown didn't follow. No one called her name. No one asked what she thought. Charles sat stiff, hands folded, jaw locked. The man who once owned every room now owned none. Eyes drifted past him like he was furniture, because the story had shifted. The spotlight had moved, and for the first time, not even his money could buy it back. Isabella glanced sideways, at Charles, then at Amara. She understood. She hadn't lost to a woman. She'd lost to a force. Not glamour, not status, but gravity. The kind that makes the world rearrange around it. And in that quiet, the real question wasn't what just happened. It was, when the spotlight moves on, who are you without it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you walk away with grace, or try to pull it back? Julian didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He simply reached over and placed his hand gently over Amara's. No cameras flashed, no music swelled. Just skin against skin. Warm, steady, sure. Amara didn't turn, didn't whisper anything sweet. She just smiled, soft and quiet, like she'd been waiting for a silence this safe. Her fingers curled around his, not tightly, but with trust. Not possession, not performance, but presence. All the rooms she'd entered before had asked her to shrink, to apologize, to prove. This was the first room where she didn't need to speak to be heard. They sat there, not in victory, but in understanding. A different kind of love, the kind that doesn't rescue you. It remembers you. What do you think? Is the strongest kind of love the loudest, or the one that never needs to raise its voice? The first book placed on the shelf at Legacy Corner wasn't a bestseller. It didn't have a movie deal, no celebrity blurbs, just a soft navy cover, worn edges, and gold letters etched like memory. To the girls who read in the dark. Amara held it with both hands, fingers brushing over the words as if touching a younger version of herself. 17. Dusty cardigan. A quiet corner in the back of the public library. Toni Morrison balanced on her knees, light flickering from a faulty bulb overhead. No one ever saw her then. But now, this shelf, this space, it saw all of her. Outside, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no press, just a little girl, maybe 10, standing at the window, staring in. She had the same wide eyes Amara once did, and just for a moment, everything circled back. What would you write on the first page of your legacy? The bell above the door chimed softly. A girl stepped in, barely 17. Braids tied back, notebook clutched tight to her chest. She walked past the shelves slowly, eyes darting from spine to spine until they landed on her. Amara. The girl hesitated, then stepped closer. Her voice was small, but steady. Thanks to you, I applied to Yale. Amara blinked, not from surprise, but because something inside her had waited years to hear those words. The girl continued, faster now. I saw your speech, the quote, and then the scholarship. I didn't think I had a shot, but I applied anyway. She paused. My mom cried when I hit submit. Amara didn't respond with the speech. She simply reached for the girl's hand, held it. No spotlight, no applause, just a quiet moment between two generations who had once been told they weren't enough. And now, they were rewriting that story, together. Amara looked the girl in the eyes, steadily, gently. You belong there, never forget that. The words didn't come out loud. They didn't need to. They settled in the room like truth long overdue. The girl nodded, lips trembling slightly, not from doubt, but from relief. Someone had seen her, really seen her. Amara held her gaze a moment longer, then added, softer now. You don't have to shrink to fit their comfort. Take up space. Ask the questions. Write your name in full. The girl smiled through tears. Behind her, a few other students had gathered, listening from a distance. This wasn't just about Yale. It wasn't about any one school or scholarship or moment. It was about telling every kid who'd ever felt too different, too poor, too invisible. You are not a guest in this future. You are the reason it exists. If no one ever told you that before, let this be the first time, and let it echo. They sat by the shoreline, where the city faded into ocean. The sky was turning that soft kind of gold that only happens when you've earned the quiet. Julian turned to her, voice low but honest. Was it worth it? Amara didn't answer right away. She watched the waves roll in, slow and certain, like they'd always known where they were going. Then she said, without hesitation, I didn't win. I chose better. Julian said nothing, because there was nothing to add. She didn't need a trophy or a title, didn't need revenge or to rewrite her name in someone else's book. She had rewritten her own, from pain to presence, from silence to strength. Some people spend their whole lives chasing victory. She had found something deeper, peace, not because the world had changed for her, but because she had stopped asking for permission to exist inside it. And maybe that's the quiet kind of power, choosing better when you could have chosen bitterness. The headline read, Charles Whitmore ousted from Whitmore Group Board. No quotes, no statements. Just a single grainy photo. Charles, jaw clenched, walking out of a glass building alone. By evening, he sat by a lake near his estate, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, phone turned face down. The water was still, too still. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes locked on the reflection beneath him. But it didn't look like him. Not really. The face staring back was older, tired, undefined, like power had been the only thing keeping his outline sharp. And now, with that gone, even his reflection struggled to stay whole. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared, waiting for something to surface. But nothing did. Not regret, not anger, just a growing silence that wrapped around him like a coat that no longer fit. Sometimes the loudest fall happens with no sound at all. Just a man, fading from the story he thought he'd written. Charles stared into the water, searching for a face he no longer recognized. Somewhere else, on a quieter street, a young girl opened the door to Legacy Corner. She ran her fingers along the spine of a book that wasn't written for her, but somehow still carried her name. And in a world that had tried to silence women like her, one woman stayed. She stayed long enough to become something more than a name, a beginning. The story didn't end with power lost. It continued with power redefined. If you've ever been pushed to the edges, cut from the frame, told to be quiet while others took the credit, type it below. I still rise. Because maybe this story isn't about who had the spotlight. It's about who survived without it. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's still learning how to begin again.